Okay, this video is about neurons and nervous coordination. We're going to be exploring a way to distinguish between nervous and hormonal coordination, to describe the structure of myelinated motor neurons and describe the different types of neurons. Okay, before I delve right into this lesson, as per any other lesson, I'd like to start off with some recall of what we have been doing previously. So question number one: what are the benefits of a mass transport system? Question two: define a double circulatory system. Question three: why is water cohesive? And question four: define a closed circulatory system. So, question one. Question one says, what are the benefits of a mass transport system? So if we're thinking about what the benefits of a mass transport system, it carries raw material from specialized exchange organs like the lungs to the body. The body's cells that can remove metabolic waste as well. Okay. And question two, to define a double circulatory system. So the double circulatory system is where blood flows through the heart twice for each complete circuit. For instance, the heart pumps the blood to the lungs and back to the heart, and then from the heart around the body. And to do this, it maintains high blood pressure to meet the demands of a high metabolic rate. Okay. Question three was, why is water cohesive? Now, this is an early thing that we looked at right at the beginning of year 12. Okay. So because water is polar, okay, it's got a positive end and a negative end, so this helps water flow, so it's good at transporting substances. Okay, it's got a delta positive H, and it's attracted to the delta negative zero oxygen. Okay, so we've got a column of water that it flows. Okay, and question four, define a closed circulatory system. So like for humans, for instance, blood is enclosed within vessels. Okay, diffusion of substances only takes place within vessels. Okay, so the blood capillaries, the diffusion goes in and out there, so that is an enclosed system. Okay, excellent. One of the amazing things about science is how cells specialize. They turn on and off their genes to be able to become specialist cells, and those specialist cells therefore act together to perform specialist functions. However, in isolation, that is no good, because the cells that perform reproduction, for instance, their specific job is to do that, but they have no way of getting oxygen to their cells and to be able to do other things as well. So we have to be able to have all these different tissues and organs that communicate with each other to be able to run an entire organism. So we're going to be having a look at how the whole organism can coordinate with each other in this video, and specifically one specific way of doing that is nervous coordination. Okay, so we're going to be investigating and looking at in nervous coordination. Okay, well, I thought I'd start by drawing a sensory neuron, and the sensory neuron is a good place to start because that's maybe the start of the signal. So the signal starts by having some kind of receptor. So here it's got a receptor, okay, being formed. So the receptor at this end, so I'm just going to label that receptor. And then we have the cell itself coming away from the receptor. We've got the dendron coming away from the receptor, and then that leads into the cell body, and then away from the cell body we have the axon, okay. So we're gonna add a couple of labels in here. Okay, so we can see that we've got the direction of the impulse comes from the receptor in this direction. Okay, that's the direction of the nerve impulse. Okay, direction of the impulse in that direction. Okay, so we've got this is the cell body. Okay, here, the cell body. We've got the axon. Now we got specialist Schwann cells that come around here, and they protect and insulate. They insulate the dendron and the axon, so we can have a better, faster impulse that gets sent along the neuron. So these Schwann cells, their membranes are highly myelinated, and so we call that bit the myelin sheath. Is the membranes of these Schwann cells and myelin sheath. Okay. Right, so we can call these Schwann cells, which we'll do that. Okay, that's spelled SCHWANN cells. That's the Schwann cells here. Okay, which their membranes make up myelin sheath. Okay, MYELIN. Okay, the myelin sheath. Now, if that's like in layers. If we were to cut down there and look on its side on, we have in this case here, we've got the dendron coming through here, and then we've got the cell body, and we've got this. It's a bit like in layers, where it's the cell. So this would be the dendron, or if it was over here, the axon, and then we have the nucleus here of the Schwann cell. And the Schwann cells are there protecting the neuron. Okay, and that's what happens there. Now, so the direction goes dendron, leads up to the cell body, a collection of cells. It could be more than one. It could be a number of dendrites in this case. So this doesn't have to be from one receptor. It could be from multiple. So you could have multiple dendrites coming into it, form a dendron. After the cell body, one single one afterwards, we call that an axon. Okay, so we're happy with that. We've got the fact that the dendron is an extension of the cell body. Okay, which it subdivides into smaller branch fibers called dendrites. They carry the nerve impulse towards the cell body. Okay, towards the cell body. The impulse is going towards the cell body. Okay, whereas the axon is a single long fiber. Okay, a single long fibre. Okay, that takes the nerve impulse away from the cell body. It takes the nerve impulse away from the cell body. Okay, then you've got the nucleus here, and then we've got our nucleolus. Okay, this is the cell body itself. Obviously, and the axon leads into the axon plates to this side. We've drawn the axon plates there, but the axon plates will be a little bit like dendrites. The axon plates, okay, that are passing the signal on from the receptor along this sensory neuron. This is a sensory neuron. We haven't labelled it, but it's a sensory neuron. It's a sensory neuron, and this is the axon plates. And this is going to go to a coordinator, so like an intermediary neuron next, okay, within the central nervous system. So this links into the central nervous system. So these cells make up the peripheral nervous system, and then these link into the central nervous system. Okay, and that's a direction. So this leads here to the nerve endings. We call the nerve ending with our receptors. Okay, we cut it in half and look at what the Schwann cells that protect it, and the nerve impulse goes in this direction, this way. Okay, in this direction, and then from this direction here. Okay. Okay, this time we're looking at a motor neuron, and this time we're going to start off in the central nervous system. So it starts in the central nervous system with the dendrites. So the dendrites lead into the cell body. So the dendrites are really, really thin, and they lead into a cell body. Okay, it's not a very good picture, but you get my drift. So this is the motor neuron. Now we have inside, so this is like the inside the central nervous system, and we've got the dendrites again, which then lead into the dendrons. So dendrites to the dendrons. Here we go. So there's a dendron here, which take the impulse into the cell body. This is the cell body. We've got the nucleus here, and then inside the nucleus we've got the nucleolus. Now it's slightly different obviously than our previous diagram we saw. So we've got our Schwann cells with the myelin sheath here, that's protecting. So there's our Schwann cells. Let's add that diagram in. Let's add that label in there. So these are Schwann cells. Okay, there's the nucleus of the Schwann cells there. You can see I've drawn them in the dots there, and it's made up of myelin. The membranes, myelin sheath. The gaps between them, which they are, they're called the node and Ranvier. Okay, we forgot to mention this on the other one. The node of Ranvier. The node around is quite an interesting part of the cell. We would say that it's about 2 to 3 micrometers long. So we could add that there. 2 to 3 micrometers in length, the distance between. Now, they happen after each of the Schwann cells. There's a little gap between the Schwann cells. That happens between every 1 to 3 millimeters. I'll put that in a different colour. So between 1 and 3 millimeters, the length of each Schwann cell, and then after that we've got 2 to 3 micrometer gap, which is the node of Ranvier, where there's no myelin sheath and no Schwann cells protecting. Now the signal is coming in this direction. So the signal direction originating from the central nervous system, down the dendrites and the dendron to the cell body, away from the cell body again is the axon. Here the axon is away from the cell body, this single fibre taking the message away from the cell body. At the other end we have the axon terminal plate. Okay, the axon terminal plate. Now we might as well use my red again there, because this could be inside a muscle, for instance. So we've got the axon terminal plates, which is going to lead to send a message in here. So this message, starts in the central nervous system and goes out to the peripheral nervous system, sends it to the muscles, all the glands, which are going to be affected by this nerve impulse at the axon terminal plates there. Okay, this time we're going to draw an intermediate neuron. Okay, intermediate neuron. Sometimes we might call that a relay neuron. Again, this is totally inside the central nervous system. Okay, this is passing the message from one neuron to another. Okay, so in the central nervous system. Now this is a slightly different looking cell. So I'm going to draw it faint to start with, because we've got the dendrites and the dendrons. Okay, leading in, sending the message. So we have dendrites. I'm just going to draw a few like this. Now here we go, we've got the dendrites. Right, sometimes okay. Now this is tricky to label, to know exactly where the labels are. Okay, but however, we'll help with the labels by drawing on it the direction of the impulses. Now, an impulse across a nerve can only go in one direction, so we go towards the cell body, and then from the cell body, away from the cell body. So that'll help with our labeling. So we've got our dendron and our dendrites, which are taking the impulse towards the cell body, and then we've got our axon, which is taking the impulse away from the cell body. Again, this is our cell body here. Cell body, I've drawn a nucleus and a nucleolus. The nucleus, and the nucleolus. Okay, that's quite a simple cell, very small. Okay, lots of multiple dendrites on this one. Okay, so the intermediate neuron, they transmit impulses between neurons. And when we write that down, they transmit between neurons. For example, from sensory to motor neurons, they have numerous short processes. In that case, we would call it a relay neuron. Okay, in a previous lesson we looked at that. So this is an intermediate or a relay neuron. Okay, short, numerous processes. Okay, right. In this section, I just really wanted to quickly talk you through the generalized structure of a mammalian neuron. So we talked about the cell body in the previous sections. This is all the organelles, including a large amount of rough endoplasmic reticulum associated with the production of proteins and the neurotransmitters that are going to pass on the signal across the synapse. We have dendrons. They are extensions of the cell body which subdivide into smaller branched fibers called dendrites, which carry out impulses towards the cell body. That's always towards, so the axon is towards the cell body. Okay, the axon, a single long fiber which carries a nerve impulse away from the cell body. We've got the Schwann cells which wrap around the axon or the dendron, and their layers of their membranes form a myelin sheath, which the myelin sheath is the lots of myelin that makes up their membrane, which protects the axon. It provides electrical insulation. It stops it touching other cells and having a like wires might cross and then get a signal cross wired. It prevents that, so that's what we call electrical insulation. And it carries out, they also carry out phagocytosis, removing cell debris, and play a good big part in nerve regeneration for any nerve damage that might be caused. Okay, the Schwann cells here, you can see by the diagram in the top corner, are long, thin cells that wrap around each other with a nucleus at one end. And they grow in circles around. They are between 1 and 3 millimeters long, and they do the job of insulating the neuron. Okay, the myelin sheath forms a covering to the axon, and it's made up of membranes of Schwann cells, which are rich in the lipid myelin. Neurons with the myelin sheath are called myelinated neurons. And then lastly, but not least, is the nodes of Ranvier. They are the gaps between the Schwann cells along the axon, along the dendron, consists between adjacent Schwann cells where there's no myelin sheath, no electrical insulation on those parts. Now, before I move on to go through some questions on cell structure of the neurons, I just wanted to briefly talk to you about the principles of the coordination. So we said at the beginning that there are two main forms of coordination in animals, the nervous system and the hormonal system, and in this we're focusing just a bit on the nervous system. So what is the job of these nerve cells or neurons is they are to pass electrical impulses along their length. Okay, they start where they're created by a receptor cell, and they send a signal along an electrical impulse, and they then secrete chemicals known as neurotransmitters directly onto them. This results in rapid communication between specific parts of an organism. The responses produced are often short-lived, and often just to a specific area of the body, like say a muscle contraction or a movement like that. Okay, an example of nervous coordination is a reflex, action. We looked at a reflex action before, like the knee-jerk reaction, or if you remove your hand off something really, really hot. For this type of action is talked about in other areas of our topic. However, this idea of that, how our cells are in isolation to each other, they are specialized, so they need to be able to communicate from one area to another to work as a whole, as an organism. So the nerve sends that electrical impulse along its length. It has neurotransmitters between the cells to be able to send that signal, and then pass the signal to do something else, so that then the muscle cells would then contract and do their job. So the communication from one place to the other. Excellent.